Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the DC Coalition on DDOT Bike Plans Town Hall on DC Bike Lanes with special guest DDOT Director Everett Lott. Today's date is January 25th, 2022, and the time is officially now 7 p.m. I'm your host and moderator for this event, Jamal DJ One Luv Muhamad, host of the Love Lounge radio show every Tuesday at 8 p.m. and the Old School Lunch Bag Mix every Wednesday from noon to 2 p.m., both on digitalanalogradio.com. Before we get started, I want to go over a few things, everyone. The goal of this town hall is to give the greater DC community the opportunity to communicate directly with DDOT and other government agencies without bias, marginalization, and to devise ways to best move forward for the greater good of the DC community in regard to the DC Bike Lane project. There is no political, social, or financial incentives or gains. People simply want to be heard and their rights in existence as human beings respected. The DC Coalition Bike Plan, DC Coalition on DDOT Bike Plan is comprised of residents, property owners, business owners, members of the faith-based community, government officials, and activists, people from all demographics from all over the District of Columbia, all with concerns on the bike lanes being put in place in DC. We are supportive of bike lanes, biker safety, and the environment. Some of us, such as my own self, are longtime avid bike riders ourselves. However, we also know that some bike lanes have been extremely disadvantageous to the many citizens and communities as well. And this is why we have to find better ways to communicate and to improve the bike lane project so that it can benefit the overall DC community. Now, I want to go over a couple of rules for this town hall. Because this is extremely important if we want to make this to be effective. As the host and the moderator, for the sake of time and efficiency, I will be asking a list of questions that have been put together from research, investigations, and community outreach from our coalition and from other concerned citizens. If we have time, once those specific questions have been addressed, I will relay some questions from the audience to Director Lott and his team. The chat group. The chat group will be critically monitored and enforced to ensure that there will be no vulgarities, obscenities, disrespecting, or personal attacking of any nature at any time with anyone in this meeting. I will say this only once. If we deem that someone has violated these rules, we will either block them or remove them from the meeting. We take this situation regarding the bike lanes very serious, regardless of anyone's stance or opinions about the project, and want everyone to be respected. We welcome constructive opinions and want to learn from everyone who has something to say. Viewing platforms. This town hall is being recorded and it is now airing live on digitalanalogradio.com. We wanted to air it on the our Facebook and do a live stream, but we're having technical difficulties, and because of the sake of time, we were going to have to do that later. You can watch it on We Act Radio's YouTube channel or the Love Lounge Radio's show's YouTube channel as well. I want to give a special thanks out to the DC Department of Transportation, Director Lott and his team that have agreed to participate as our guests in this town hall. Members of the DC Coalition on DDOT Bike Plans, the DuPont E-Civic Action Association and Shaw Main Streets, digitalanalogradio.com and We Act Radio, and all the government officials, council, and ANC members that are joining us or have helped us to this point. And of course, all of you that are attending. With that being said, I want to welcome Director Everett Lott. Where are you, Director Lott, and his team?
I am here. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm doing great, sir, and thank you very much for participating. I'm so glad that you have honored your word, and that means a whole lot to me, brother. So with that being said, Director Lott, you have a presentation that you wanted to present to the audience in regards to what the Bike Lane project is about. Do you have that ready?
Yeah, I believe that we passed that on to your team a little bit earlier this evening. And so I believe someone may be driving it from your side, but yes, I'm ready.
All right, so here we go. Let's get this thing started.
Great. Well, first of all, let me just say thank you to you, Mr. Muhammad, DJ One Luv. I really appreciate this opportunity to meet with the host of folks that are on this call this evening. And as you did mention, this kind of culminated and came about as a result of an ANC meeting that I participated in, I think back in October, is ANC 8C07. where it was my first time actually meeting you, and you asked if I would be amenable to having a conversation about bike lanes. And I said, absolutely. And so I'm glad that we're able to finally find a date and find a time this evening that works for us to have that conversation. So for those of you that I have not had the opportunity to meet, my name is Everett Lott. I'm the director of the DC Department of Transportation. And I've been working here in the district, both in local and federal government since 2001, and was recently appointed as the director of DDOT. And so I'm extremely pleased to be here. I'm extremely pleased to be leading this team. I am joined here today by a number of DDOT staffers who are extremely excited to have this conversation as well, and have been working tirelessly throughout the city and throughout the district in all 8 wards to discuss and to talk about the bike lanes, bicycle infrastructure, et cetera. And so we're going to have that conversation. I recognize from the conversation that I had with you, Mr. Muhammad, that there may have been some groups in all 8 wards that, we may not have been able to meet, to talk to, or to reach out to for various reasons. And so I believe this particular meeting allows us to be able to have that opportunity to meet with a larger group of folks that we may not have been able to meet with in the past. So again, so thank you for that opportunity to come together and to discuss some of these concerns. And if we can, we'll go ahead and move right on to the next slide. And so I think we'll go to slide number 3. One more, please. Perfect. So, I don't know if I should call you DJ One Luv or should I call you Mr. Muhammad? What do you prefer?
DJ One Luv is my branding name, so let's go with that.
All right, DJ One Luv. So, I appreciate you setting kind of some of the expectations. I really do. I appreciate that, and I was wanting to do the same thing. And so, before I actually begin my presentation, I'd like to kind of do some expectation setting myself. I've received many emails, many calls from lots of different people over the past couple of weeks as this particular event was being promoted and being announced. Most of the calls I received were folks that were suggesting, encouraging me not to participate. But as I had mentioned just now on this call, I like to keep my word. And when we met back in October at the ANC 8C07, you asked, and I said I would definitely be willing to come out. And so I'm honoring that. I believe that everyone has a right to access the government. And when I say the government, that means the DC Department of Transportation as well. And this access is not predicated on where we stand on the issues. And so I'm here to have a conversation. I'm here to listen to those who are for bike lanes, as well as those who may not be for bike lanes and not support bike lanes. But at the end of the day, I want to have a conversation, really just listen and have that dialogue. We also believe that transparency and public dialogue are extremely important. And these are important priorities that I value. And I want to take this opportunity to have a very robust discussion and a robust conversation. While our discussion will not necessarily, change, in terms of the removal or the reconstruction of some of the installations that we've already made, what this conversation will do is it will give us insight on how to improve our current infrastructure, and also give us insight on how to make improvements as we go forward in any of the investments that we plan on in the future. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we're reaching out to a wide group of folks so we can get input. At the end of the day, what makes this successful is that we have input from all groups, all people, from all 8 wards. And so that's part of the reason for having this conversation today. I think it's going to be very informative, and it will definitely help us in any of the future planning. The next slide, please. I think you can go back one. Yeah. So last year, we completed our updated Move DC plan, which is our multimodal long-range transportation plan. A key emphasis of the Move DC plan is on 7 key priorities, our key goals: safety, equity, mobility, project delivery, a state of good repair, sustainability, and enjoyable spaces. So those are kind of our guiding principles when we talk about Move DC. The plan is currently available for all of you to review, and you can actually go to movedc.dc.gov. And on the Move DC website, you can find a map of the city's bicycle network, both the present as well as future installations in all quarters in all 8 wards. Next slide, please. So the district is known nationally, and I want to emphasize that we are known nationally for our very robust bicycle network. and it serves a model and has served as a model for all other cities in the United States, but also other cities throughout the country. And so this network helps support our sustainability goals for transportation, which include reducing drive or single occupancy vehicles from 34% down to 25% by the year 2032. So we're about 10 years away from getting down to that goal. And by that same year, our goal is to increase biking as well as walking commuter trips to 25% in all 8 wards. And as noted in our Sustainable DC, our 2.0 plan, the district's plan is to support a healthy as well as a green DC. So 21% of global warming gases comes from transportation, comes from cars, comes from pollutants. And so that's one of the things that really focus on trying to help to eliminate. And so starting in 2022, this year, DDOT has established a performance goal to install 10 miles of protected bike lanes each year. You may have heard the mayor make this announcement over this past summer as we were rolling out this 22 budget, that we'll be installing 10 years of protected bike lanes, or 30 miles of protected bike lanes, excuse me, over the next 3 years. So 10 miles each year for the next 3 years. Slide number 6, please. Next slide. Thank you. So one of the questions that I was asked a little bit earlier was, how do we determine the locations of the bike lanes? So how do we decide where these lanes go is essentially what's being asked. So individual bike lanes the projects are initiated based on a few factors, which include the connections to other existing bike lanes, the corridor safety record, the feasibility as well as the impact assessments, and also the internal resources that are available to complete the project. Some bike lane projects are also specifically recommended through our livability studies that we've conducted over the past many years. Next slide. So in the district, we have 2 types of bike lanes. We have the standard bike lane and also the protected bike lane. The protected bike lanes are the best way to encourage new cyclists, and they also help meet our city's safety and our sustainability goals. So for streets with safety hazards, such as high traffic volumes or speed, and if they're on major or even minor arterial roads, we will build what we call a protected bike lane. Some examples of protected or examples of some major arterial roads include Florida Avenue Northwest, Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest, and some examples of our minor arterial roads includes like Ridge Road Southeast, Nanny Helen Burroughs over in Northeast. But on a narrower street or lower traffic, lower volume streets, such as a collector street like Massachusetts Avenue in Southeast, or P Street in Northwest, we may install a protected or even an unprotected lane, depending on factors such as the traffic volumes, the access and the connectivity to the schools, to the parks, to the recreation centers, to playgrounds, as well as to the proximity to other protected facilities. And to further assist in the pinpointing of the type of bike lane that we would implement, we use, or DDOT uses, both the National Association of City Transportation Officials, better known as NACTO, the Bicycle Selection Guide, and also the Federal Highway FHWA Bikeway Selection Guide as well. So those are 2 different sources that we will use. Next slide, please. Now, as we were talking about assessing the impacts on and the planning of the partnerships, we at DDOT, we're required by the National Environmental Protection or Policy Act, which we refer to as NEPA, to assess the impacts in the design of all transportation projects, and that includes bike lanes. We assess the impacts and make necessary planning adjustments based on a few things. Let me tell you what those are. We look at the access, again, to public transportation. We also look at the traffic flow and the traffic pattern changes, parking utilization, which I know is a big question that has been raised, the disabled and handicapped access, as well as delivery access. And so while we don't necessarily coordinate with parcel delivery or passenger pickup services, we do, however, assess for commercial loading needs and the pickup and drop-off zones. Our planning is carefully coordinated with regional and also with federal partners like WMATA, the Architect of the Capitol, the National Park Service, and also other DC government agencies or DC government partners, such as the Fire and Emergency Medical Services Department, the Department of Public Works, the Department of Parks and Recreation, as well as the Executive Office of the Mayor. And we consult with all these different groups when bike lane projects impact their facilities or if it impacts their service delivery. While we're not legislatively mandated outside of the central business district, and let me repeat that, we're not legislatively mandated outside of the central business district, we also work with our ADA coordinators, our accessibility coordinators, to pinpoint accessible parking and loading locations. And I'll just repeat that again. While we're not legislatively mandated outside of the central business district, we do, however, work with our ADA coordinators to pinpoint accessible parking as well as loading locations. Next slide, please. Now, another factor that we take into consideration with the bike lane project is the impact on faith-based institutions. And these are extremely important stakeholders in the process. And I have personally engaged with church pastors. I have personally engaged with church administrators. I have personally engaged with the churches on the planning of our bike infrastructure, where it may impact their facilities. And I will continue to do that. And my team, we will continue to do that. An example of a couple of the churches that I have recently worked with over the past couple of years is New Bethel Baptist Church, as well as Shiloh Baptist Church, both on 9th Street in 9th Street Northwest. And you know, this past summer or this past spring, the mayor announced that we would be implementing a bike lane on 9th Street that would be about, I think, 1.7 miles, and it's a north-south travel lane for the bicycle lane and bicycle infrastructure. And so again, I've been meeting and will continue to meet with the churches, but specifically New Bethel Baptist Church, Pastor Nuttall, Shiloh Baptist Church, Pastor Smith, to make sure that those things that were not impacting them and impacting their congregation in a negative way. And so we've really tried to make accommodations to make sure they were still able to maintain their operation, maintain their church services, and maintain the parking for their congregants. And so we will continue to do that. I just want to make sure that I'm really emphasizing that. And it's not just those churches, it's all churches throughout the district, all places of faith-based places. In 2015, DDOT completed a feasibility study that demonstrated the need for a north-south biking connection from U Street northwest to Pennsylvania Avenue. And this is the 9th Street was what was deemed most feasible with the least negative impacts. And when I say negative impacts, the least conflicts to pedestrians, which are our most vulnerable users. So since the restart of that project back in May of 2021, again, DDOT has consulted, and I have personally consulted with both Shiloh and New Bethel on the impacts. Again, I personally worked with Pastor Nuttall and Smith to address the concerns regarding parking, traffic, and overall safety. And again, really trying to make sure that we accommodated the concerns that they had identified that would be a negative impact to their congregation, negative impact to their service, or negative impact to some of their auxiliary operations, such as child development centers and things like that. As these projects continue through the design phase and ultimately into construction, we will continue to engage with those residents and with the faith community. And again, I want to reemphasize that as these projects continue through the design phase and ultimately into the construction, that we will and I will continue to engage with the residents as well as the faith-based community. Next slide, please. So the ANC and the council member engagement is an extremely important part and an extremely significant part of our process to gain ultimate community feedback. Every bike lane project that DDOT has implemented and has had changes based on the ANC consultation that we've had, the ANC input, and we will continue to consult and work with the ANCs throughout all 8 wards. The ANCs are the elected officials representing the community at the most micro level, and we are required by law to notify them of all of our projects that affect parking and affect traffic, and to also give their resolutions what we call great weight. And I just want to note for the group here, I am a former two-term ANC commissioner for DO5. So I do understand and I do appreciate the value that the ANCs do contribute to the community. and they do provide a lot of helpful insight to us as a DOT. And so we will continue to partner and work with the ANCs, as well as all elected officials here in Washington, D.C. But also want to note that when we talk about great weight, we also give great weight to our council members on all our transportation projects. And as an example, we deferred to the request of the Ward 8 council member, and as a result have not installed any additional bike lanes since 2019 over in Ward 8. And that was based on the request of the council member. And so as a result, we have accommodated that request and have not installed any additional bike lanes since 2019. Last year, the council approved the mayor's budget, and this is the 22 to 27 year budget, calling for the implementation, as I had referenced a little bit earlier, of 10 miles of protected bike lanes per year for the next 3 years. And in 2019, the council endorsed our 20 by 22 plan, which was 20 by 22, a protected bike lane program, which directed the installation of 20 miles of protected bike lanes by the end of this year. For each of the projects we advance towards construction, we, the DDOT, will distribute what we call a NOI, a notice of intent, which summarizes all of the projects and the scope of the project. The NOI, or the notice of intent, will include information on any changes to the travel lanes, any changes to parking, and for the projects that will remove residential parking, again, we will work with the ANCs to put door flyers out to residents' homes in hopes that we can get more of those residents out to come to these ANC meetings where we have presented and where we will continue to present. We do find that the ANC is probably the best place where we can convene, or they can convene a group. So we can go out to that ANC, again, where I met DJ One Luv, and be able to talk about a host of issues that are related to transportation. And so that's where we've been meeting over the past many years, and we will continue to do that. The NOI process is required by law, and we strictly follow it for all of our bike lane projects. However, even after a bike lane is installed, we still appreciate the input that's provided by the users of the bike lanes, as well as that are living near or affected by the bike lanes. And so we've gotten feedback even as recently as of today from those living near bike lanes, those who are using the bike lanes, or those who've been affected by the bike lanes. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about equity and inclusion. With this planned forward motion toward expanding our bike lane infrastructure, our bike lane network, we know that the engagements like our discussions today are extremely important. And that is why we are here today. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm joined by many members of my team to have a very robust conversation and to be able to listen and take a lot of feedback in. With our Move DC plan update, we made an organizational-wide commitment to equity from the start of every project. And so understanding how communities utilize their public space, how these spaces will evolve in future years, how change impacts the current community and supports the future are all equity-based considerations. We've also made a parallel commitment to safety. So every major infrastructure installation will be designed to improve pedestrian and roadway safety. And bike lane projects will include safety improvements like safer crosswalks and traffic calming. Next slide, please. So we recognize that, of course, there's no one size fits all approach to planning or implementing infrastructure. And this even includes our bike lanes, right? And as a director, I've charged my team, our DDOT executive leadership team, to work with our diversity and inclusion team, as well as our Vision Zero team at the initial onset of the planning of major capital projects. And so moving forward, to ensure we consider the whole of our communities as we build for the present and as we plan for the future here in Washington, D.C. So we are doing all we can to make our city more sustainable for all users. And this is all users of the roadway. And we are grateful to have the opportunities like this to help offer the public a better understanding of what our transportation goals are and how we can all work together to achieve them. So DJ One Luv, Mr. Muhammad, I'd like to again, thank you for taking this time for me to allow for this presentation, allowing for my group, for my team and myself to be a part of this discussion. And, we all look forward to taking some questions and listen to the rest of the presentations that others may have as well. So again, thank you very much.
Absolutely. And thank you, Director Lott, for your presentation and your time and your team's time as well. With that said, we're going to move on to our next portion. We have a couple of presentations from members of the DC Coalition on DDOT Bike Plans. And next up is going to be our presenter, Dr. Allison Agu, who is a property owner on West Virginia Avenue in Ward 5 in DC. She has a presentation on community concerns with bike plans in West Virginia Avenue and across the city of Washington, DC. Dr. Agu, you are next.
First, thank you, Director Lott, for taking the time to meet with us and for rebuking those who told you not to. I really do appreciate you honoring your word. So I'm going to be speaking on West Virginia Avenue. And first, I just want to really highlight the timeline of the bike lanes on West Virginia Avenue for those who are not familiar with this. And this has been a long-standing process since the early 2000s in terms of bike lane being planned. In February of 2020, there was a resolution passed by our ANC asking for those bike lanes as well as other improvements for West Virginia Avenue. There was a specific note in that resolution that whatever that bike lane plan was done should minimize the impact of local resident street parking. And this is the existing conditions on West Virginia Avenue at the time. This is a presentation by DDOT to our ANC commission, showing them what the plan was for what would happen with the bike lane, the protected bike lane, which includes preserved parking in the section on West Virginia Avenue. And it's highlighted in that presentation that that parking was heavily used and it would remain available in front of the residents. Just to highlight, as people who know ANC commissions, there was a hiatus in the summer, and then several meetings we went through every meeting, and there was no discussion further of the bike lanes. And the next time the bike lanes came up was in February of 2021, where there was discussion of the next phase for West Virginia Avenue. At that point, there was no mention of any kind of NOI or anything that would relate to parking. When we go back and pull that NOI, we do see that in July of 2020, an NOI was submitted while the ANC was on hiatus, which talked about a modification of the plan that was presented to the ANC, which eliminated that parking. And by the time that February 2021 meeting came about, that NOI had expired, removing the opportunity for the committee of the ANC to weigh in. In June of 2021, the bike lanes were installed, eliminating the entire parking for that block of West Virginia Avenue. And that block is essentially landlocked. There's no alley. There's literally no parking anywhere in that block. And that began some discussion from the residents with DDOT. And DDOT acknowledged that the normal public posting that normally would be done was not done. So breaching some of the timeline and the things that are supposed to happen due to a Department of Public Works issue. And so that notification had not gone out to those residents. And so they literally woke up and their parking was gone. And then the 1800 block subsequently in September of 2021 had 70% of the parking removed. So just to highlight some of the concerns from a public health and safety standpoint, for those of you who are familiar with that section and that part of the city, public safety number one is the residents are unable to park. They have to find parking that's distant from their home. Again, no alley, making Capitol Avenue, which is really not an option because at that point, there was no parking there and it's a very unsafe park next to there. And it's an increased challenge not for all residents, particularly those who are elderly, disabled, small children, pregnant. And these are personal stories from those. Public health safety concern number two, residents unable to even pull up because there's nowhere to drop off, rideshare, groceries unloading, contractors, anything to actually work on your property or to unload into your property without obstructing the bike lanes or the street, the danger to themselves, cars, cyclists, etc. Number three, very high crime ridden areas with lots of reports of assault, shootings, robberies, and being forced to park your car a significant distance away really does, and walking at all hours of the night really does subject one to harm, to real harm. And again, increasing for those who have disabilities or challenges. In terms of the community, there are real financial concerns, so limited parking, and then if there is parking with limited timeframes, has led to some predatory ticketing of residents by the meter maids. And now to even work on properties, you have to obtain permits and still getting tickets, even despite having permits done on those properties. And then loss of property values. We do know that we'll hear quoted that bike lanes can improve property values. That may be true, but if there's no parking, people are not going to spend significant amounts for their parking. And this is a courtesy of John Elevato, who owns a property on West Virginia Avenue. Not saying the bike lanes are the sole reason for the loss of his property value, but each of his 2 units sold for over $200,000 below what they were listed at, with multiple realtors giving feedback that the bike lanes and lack of parking was a real challenge. And they actually are considering how to assess for damages. So I think importantly, and really to underscore, is the disregard that the community feels. The ANC resolution specifically approves bike lanes, but that created solutions that minimize the impact on parking, and the implemented plans were never acknowledged or received by that ANC and were clearly deviant from what was presented, and that public notification was not done. So literally people felt like the carpet was removed from their legs and that was it. And it's a primarily African-American, Black, often marginalized residents of the community, and we feel further marginalized by the implementation of the bike lane project. And I will say, as you speak to racial equity, it's doubtful that the same procedures and the same way these are implemented would be done in other parts of the city that had different demographic. And when in discussions, unfortunately, all the potential solutions seem to prioritize every other entity, bikers that do not live there, trucks, Home Depots, everything, except for those longstanding African-American residents of that community. And we have had community stories, parents with young children, elderly with disabilities, people with metro access, talking about battling over parking, interactions with cyclists. We did have a rally in September of 2021 to try to call attention to this. And interestingly, though they would not go on camera, even the police officers, several police officers actually stopped and said, can't say anything on camera, but this is a mess all over the city. I'm glad you all are saying it. Parking enforcement officers, this is a postal service worker who had to park in a bike lane across the street to traverse 2 lanes of traffic to deliver the mail. Issues with getting our trash and recycling picked up. And then bus drivers now obstruct the driving lane as they can no longer pull over and then because of the bike lane. So really slowing traffic, causing congestion as well. I will say, having had lots of discussions with DDOT emails, et cetera, have been really felt, again, further marginalized. The initial response was really, there's nothing we can do. Explanations as to why they deviate from the plans that we're presenting, but then nothing we can do. And with countless hounding and emails, ultimately, some proposals were made. So 3 or 4 spaces in front of my property, and then potentially some additional spaces around the corner in a street perpendicular to West Virginia Avenue. But we were told that there was that they would have to do an NOI, public posting, lots of things that would need to happen before that would happen. We were concerned about the additional impact of removing that bidirectional streetway onto West Virginia Avenue, and did not think that was the best solution at the time, and said we'd see what the community says. Well, implemented with no community input, no NOIs, nothing was placed to do that. And now we have a one-way with people being confused, et cetera, because it didn't happen. So all that to say, West Virginia Avenue, we have lots of issues with access for individual seniors, lack of parking, disruption of our services, limited alternative modes of transportation. We don't have a metro right there. There's inconvenience with the busing. We have crime. We really feel lack of comprehensive input, financial impact, property owners, businesses at the other end of West Virginia Avenue, the obstruction of the bus lanes, congestion, pedestrian, cyclist, driver safety is a concern, a disruption of rideshare, and then yes, racial inequity. And while we're talking about West Virginia Avenue, as you know, we're talking as a coalition, we're seeing this is going to be something that is already in place in other parts. K Street, which is also, we feel, egregious in terms of the removal of all the parking in some aspects, but 9th Street, 17th Street, Black churches, really, and even in those areas that are planned. So really looking forward to the discussion of this and your thoughts and feedback. Thank you for the time.
All right, thank you, Dr. Agu. And next up, we have DC residents with disabilities, ADA concerns with bike lane plans, and that presentation is going to be spearheaded by Ed Hanlon, Esquire. Ed, are you ready?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. I would like to talk for a few minutes about the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, and DDOT's bike lane designs. First, many of us are familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we call it the ADA. The ADA is one of the most comprehensive pieces of civil rights legislation in American history. It prohibits discrimination against the disabled, and it guarantees people with disabilities will have the same opportunities as everyone else to fully participate in the mainstream of American life. Can I have the next slide in my presentation? I think it'll be page 15 of the PowerPoint presentations. Title II of the ADA applies to all local government units, including Washington, D.C. It requires local governments to make their programs and their facilities accessible to the disabled. That includes specifically making their streets and their sidewalks and their on-street parking accessible to the disabled. Now, the ADA applies to all new construction after 1992, but it also applies to all alterations that affect usability. They must be made to be readily accessible and usable by individuals with disabilities to the maximum extent feasible by the local government. What does that mean in this case for tonight? It means public on-street parking facilities constructed or altered after 1992, which is what DDOT is doing presently, must be made readily accessible and usable to the disabled to the maximum extent feasible. If we can go to the next slide. Let's take a look for a moment at what DDOT is actually doing with respect to the ADA. This next slide comes from DDOT's website on bike lanes, and it has a picture of a bike lane, which I assume DDOT believes is well designed and stereotypic of the type of bike lane they would like to install across the city. I would call your attention to a couple of things with this particular bike lane photo on DDOT's website. Notice that the parking has been pushed away from the curb in order to install the bike lane. Parking used to be along the curb here until the bike lane was installed. Then a barrier lane was installed, and then you can see the vehicles to the very right of the photo. The passenger side of these vehicles run along the barrier. What that means is that if a handicapped individual, someone who uses a wheelchair or a walker, is trying to get out of a Metro Access van or a handicapped accessible van or vehicle, they have to exit directly into the barrier lane with those plastic pylons sticking up in the air. But there's no way to get a wheelchair down that barrier lane because of the pylons are obstructing the passage. Therefore, assuming one could get out of their vehicle and set up their wheelchair in the barrier lane, they would have to enter the bike lane. Once entering the bike lane, they could not get to the sidewalk because there's a curb, and no wheelchair and most walkers won't be able to go over that curb. Therefore, a wheelchaired individual will have to travel down the bike lane, perhaps 150 feet, perhaps several hundred feet, down the bike lane to the nearest intersection or accessible curb cut. And that is just a major problem for disabled individuals. In this case, exiting here, the disabled individual actually have to be traveling in the direction of the oncoming bike traffic to try to reach a safe access to the sidewalk. If we can see the next slide, please. This is 17th Street. I draw your attention to this recent design by DDOT. If you notice, the vehicles are parked to the right of the photo. Then DDOT has installed a barrier that's 3 feet wide. It has cement blocks on the surface. It has pylons. If a vehicle pulls up here and the driver, like Commissioner Rogers, who speak in a few minutes, attempts to get out of his vehicle and set up his wheelchair in order to get to the sidewalk, look what he has to do. He somehow has to find a space that doesn't have a cement block next to it or a pylon next to it. Then he has to be able to swing his door open wide enough to somehow be able to set up his wheelchair. Once his wheelchair is set up, he cannot travel down the barrier lane because DDOT has obstructed the barrier lane with these cement blocks and pylons. He has to enter the bike lane. So he's entering the oncoming cycle traffic. He cannot get to the sidewalk. Again, you can see to the left of the photo, there's another barrier, and then there's the curb. And so Commissioner Rogers or anyone else would have to travel down the bike lane 100 feet, 200 feet to find the nearest accessible curb cut or to the next intersection. Can we see the next slide, please? This is another picture of 17th Street. I may have heard Director Lott wrong a moment ago. I thought he may have said that DDOT was not statutorily required to provide ADA accessible parking outside the central business district. Maybe he'll have an opportunity to correct that or explain that. Perhaps I've heard him wrong. However, this is a section of 17th Street. You take a look at it for a moment. I would note first the bicyclist is going in the wrong direction. This is a one-way bike lane going the opposite direction. But that indicates the problem for a disabled individual. A disabled individual in one of these vehicles parked here. Remember, the parking lane has been pushed away from the sidewalk. So if you're a disabled driver trying to get out, you have to find a place where there's no cement block, no pylon. You got to set up your wheelchair or get in your walker, and then you've got to walk into the bike lane. And then where do you go? You can't get to the sidewalk. There's a streetery here. DDOT has authorized the streetery. So you must travel up or down the bike lane to the nearest curb cut or intersection. And this is particularly stressful because in this case, as this biker demonstrates, some bikers go in the opposite direction, the wrong direction on a cycle track. If you were a disabled passenger in this vehicle that you can see parked here, you could not exit the passenger side because you get hit by the truck. Can I see the next slide, please? Here is Commissioner Kevin Rogers at 17th Street demonstrating how he has to be able to park, open his door all the way, take his folding wheelchair, set up his folding wheelchair outside his vehicle, then get into his folding wheelchair and push far enough away from his vehicle so that he can swing the door fully shut before he can attempt to access the sidewalk. And we're talking about a swing distance, perhaps 6 feet, counting where Mr. Rogers is sitting in the swing to the door. And again, he would have to cross a barrier lane, a bike lane, and travel down the bike lane in his wheelchair so he could find a safe place to access the sidewalk. Can we see the next slide, please? Thank you. This is Miss Spate. Miss Spate lives on the 1800 block of West Virginia. You can see her blue house in the bottom of the photo there in the corner. And you can see her standing on the street with her cane. She has cerebral palsy. She has limited mobility. She often uses a walker and she uses a cane. Now, there used to be parking in front of her house, the building she lives in, used to be parking on the street in front of it. But DDOT removed all that parking. And if you can see the next slide, please. Yes. Take a look at this slide. The photo to the immediate left, to the left is the bike lane. This is in front of Miss Spite's house. You can see that there is no way for a vehicle, a Metro Access van, to any longer be able to get close to the sidewalk in order to pick up this disabled individual. In the middle photo, you can see a black vehicle. This black vehicle, if it were to be picking up Miss Spate, has to stop all the traffic behind it on West Virginia Avenue, and Miss Spate has to step down from the sidewalk down into the street, walk across the bike lane, and slowly get into the vehicle. In the meantime, all traffic is backed up behind the vehicle, while Miss Spate, a handicapped individual, is attempting to access a vehicle. Can we see the next slide, please? In the next slide, what we have here is a report created by the Senior and Disability Pedestrian Safety Workshop of San Francisco Vision Zero. There are Vision Zeros everywhere in the country, trying to increase safety for all users of our roadways. This was created by Vision Zero in San Francisco in conjunction with the San Francisco Mayor's Office of Disability. And what does it show? It shows the bike lane design that DDOT is using all over the city. Sidewalk, bike lane, barrier lane, vehicles. And what does it say down here? It says parking protected cycle track with narrow buffer and soft hit posts obstructing the path of travel. A wheelchair user would not be able to unload from a vehicle in this design, and people using wheelchairs or walkers could not navigate safely down the buffer to an accessible crossing. This design is not considered safe in San Francisco. I don't know why it should be considered safe and ADA compliant in Washington, D.C. Can we see the next slide? This next slide is a disability rights hero, Ron Safadi. Ron Safadi, here he is pictured in his wheelchair. He is used to driving around his neighborhood, much like Commissioner Rogers is. And he liked to go to different places in his neighborhood. And then the city of Los Angeles built a protected bike lane and pushed the parking lane out into the street so that he was no longer able to lower his ramp onto the sidewalk to get his wheelchair out of the van. He now had to lower the wheelchair ramp into the protected bike lane. But once in the bike lane, he could not get to the sidewalk because of the curb and had to roll between 150 and 400 feet down a bike lane with cyclists in order to try to get to safe passage, safe access to the sidewalk. He sued. He sued and claimed that that design violated his rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and he won. This is in August of 2020. The federal court in Los Angeles said, on-street parking cannot properly be considered accessible without consideration of how disabled individuals reach the sidewalk from a parking space. And that's what I would say to Director Lott. How are disabled individuals supposed to reach the sidewalk safely when these bike lanes and these barriers have been put up between the sidewalk and the parking or drop-off lanes? And I really would ask Director Lott to seriously consider how we can change the designs that we are doing, and perhaps remove some of the designs, remove some of the lanes, and redesign them so that they are in fact ADA compliant and inclusive, so that people with wheelchairs and walkers can safely access the parking lane and the sidewalk. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ed Hanlon. And very, very informative. And just so everyone knows, people in the chat group, once again, I'm gonna state this, I will be asking the questions. This is an opportunity for the community. And I'm gonna say this in all fairness and reality, that from what I have seen over the past year in regards to the bike lane, bike supporters have had plenty of voice to speak. That's a fact. A lot of other people in my investigating and my activism have not in the community. So we are going to give these people this opportunity. But with that being said, speaking of the community, I want to know if we have Miss Uzella Spite up and ready to go. She is the woman that was in the slide that lives on the 1800 block of West Virginia Avenue, a 30-year resident of that location who is disabled. And I met with her personally and saw the confusion and the chaos that was created from the bike lanes being put on the West Virginia Avenue and how it has created extreme hardship with her. Is Ms. Spite ready?
I'm just having some issues getting on and off video One Luv, so I think we're going to have to move on. I can.
Okay, is Commissioner Kevin Rogers ready? Kevin Rogers, Commissioner Kevin Rogers, are you there?
He too was having issues. So
He's having issues as well?
unfortunately, he was on, but then he dropped off.
Okay, no problem. We can go back to them. I want to go back, go next to the faith-based institutions. And let's see, we have Reverend Dexter Netall of New Bethel Baptist Church on 9th Street, Northwest DC, who is Director Lott has talked about, DDOT has done work with, but we have as well. Reverend Nuttall, are you ready?
I'm here.
Okay, please, the stage is yours, sir.
Thank you so much. I won't take a lot of time. I'm sure you've heard that from a preacher before somewhere. But
Yes,
thank you, DJ One Luv, and thank you to all those that are in the space tonight, particularly my friend Director Lott, who I have spoken with and who I'm praying for vigorously in light of the sentiment that we see and the passion around this issue as is being reflected in some of the chat. The chat conversation. I pastor New Bethel Church, which is a 120-year-old stakeholder in Shaw. And we have a vibrant ministry, a vibrant membership. We do the work of housing. We do the work of returning citizens. And we intend on being in DC and in the community, and not just as a side piece. So I'm speaking tonight for New Bethel and those faith institutions that are impacted by this issue, not obstinate, not unwilling to participate in the process of change as it happens, but wanting to make sure that there are some important dynamics that are protected and preserved, like culture. And many of the comments, what concerns me is the tenor and the tone even of some of the conversation and the manner in which views are expressed. The church I pastor was led before me by one of the writers of the Home Rule Charter for DC. And there was a time in DC when the streets were not as popular, and when things in DC were not as vibrant as they are. And it was at those times and moments and seasons that the city was protected, preserved, served by faith institutions and others as well. And so it's that population that I'm concerned about. And the fact of the matter is that if we consider statistics, there are some equity issues just as a general matter with regard to transportation and with regard to those who are able to allow for their voices and perspectives to be heard while others are not, perhaps. And so Shiloh Baptist is another church on 9th Street that's affected directly by the proposed 9th Street cycle track. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that it's a community. Community means that you come together and you consider the issues and the good of the whole. And I'm not sure that has happened on a broad scale basis as relates to the bike lane issue. So I'm grateful for what it is that Director Lott is doing, even in being present tonight, and how it is that he is approaching this issue, and grateful for his willingness to hear the faith institutions, and am looking forward to solutions and conversation that is communal and not based on the loudest voices in the room. I commend the research of the DC Policy Center and others. The legal conversation that was just shared was a compelling conversation to me. And I think that if we would take a step back and consider the interest and the needs of something that is beyond our own, that we can come to some solutions that actually will be for the good of the whole and for the good of the city. So thank you so much, DC One Luv. And I will yield the mic back to you.
All right, thank you very much. And let me see if Ms. Spite or Commissioner Rogers is ready as of yet. Are either one of them ready?
I think we're gonna have to move on, One Luv.
Okay. With that being said, next up is representing the businesses of Washington, D.C., and in particular, the Shaw area of Washington, D.C., is the business community's concerns with the bike plans is Mr. Alex Padro, who's the executive director of Shaw Main Streets. And Alex, I have frequented as a DJ, an event promoter, an event producer, and activist plenty of times down there in Shaw for many things, according to Art All Night and a lot of other events. And in the opening groundbreaking of a lot of the businesses, you have actually hired my services in the past. So Alex, please present your presentation. And once again, people in the chat group, we have a list of things that we're going to go through first before we start taking questions. And that is the bottom line. And this is the opportunity for the community to speak, not just people that are pro-bike. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, DJ.
You're welcome.
If I could get the first slide, Shaw Main Streets is both a historic preservation and an economic revitalization organization. And I've been the executive director of Shaw Main Streets since 2004, and I was also an ANC commissioner in Central Shaw for 20 years. From the perspective of a historian, I have to say that, and as an economic revitalization professional, I have to say that the proposed 9th Street bike lane, because DDOT has not listened to the business community and has not done what was possible to try to make adjustments in the plan so that there would be a mitigation of the severe negative impacts that are forecast as a result of the bike lanes installation. This project could easily end up being the worst thing to happen to Shaw businesses since the 1968 riot. It's going to have the next slide. This is a scene of 7th Street and the devastation that followed the riots. And the disinvestment that occurred in the neighborhood in the decades that followed ended up resulting in there being more boarded up storefronts than active businesses. Now, as a result of almost 20 years of active work on the part of Shaw Main Streets, we've supported over 400 new businesses opening, and we have had nearly 320 of them still open today. Next slide. We did lose 20 businesses due to the effects of the pandemic, but we're more concerned about the potential impacts of the cycle track and the number of businesses that we might lose forever as a result. So here's DDOT's rendering of the 9th Street cycle track. A very rosy picture. You see smiling families cycling north and south on 9th Street. I should note that this is 9th Street south of Massachusetts Avenue, where it is a one-way street. Very important consideration. But what isn't depicted in the renderings provided by DDOT is the impact that will be foisted upon the business community to the north of Massachusetts Avenue in the form of loss of customer parking. There are over 100 parking spaces that will be lost permanently as a result of the 9th Street cycle tracks installation. The reduction of northbound travel lanes to one travel lane in a northbound direction, and the impact on deliveries to business. Next slide. So there are people that will argue that cycle tracks actually create more opportunities for customers to patronize. But the actual experience on the ground has shown otherwise. This is an article from the Times of San Diego that goes into detail, and apparently at the time of this article, there were 27 businesses that had closed after the cycle track was installed in this part of San Diego. Next. The reality is that the customers that come to Shaw businesses from outside of the neighborhood, I'm talking about people that can walk, the vast majority of people that are coming to patronize our businesses, which are mostly restaurants, nightclubs, and bars, do so via automobiles. So that is a combination of private cars as well as ride shares. This is especially the case at night. While there certainly are bicyclists that do patronize our businesses, they do not represent a significant part of the customer base for our businesses. Next slide. Another consideration that DDOT has not as yet operationalized is what to do about the significant number of trucks that use 9th Street to make deliveries to businesses. This is a shot from the 1900 block of 9th Street taken this summer. That's a Goose Island beer truck that is actually parked in one of the travel lanes to be able to make deliveries to a restaurant on the block. And the reality is that when there will only be one northbound travel lane after the installation of the cycle track with the current design, which would mean that this truck would have to park in that travel lane, causing cars to have to go into ongoing traffic to get around it. Next. Over on 17th Street, delivery trucks are very commonly parking illegally on sidewalks and crosswalks and intersections, anywhere they can, even in the bicycle lanes, because legal spaces for unloading were not designed into this particular cycle track. We are hopeful that DDOT will, on 9th Street, make accommodations to make sure that we don't have this type of disaster taking place. This is in front of the Safeway on 17th Street with the truck actually parked on the sidewalk. Next slide. So this is the design that's proposed for the 1900 block of 9th Street. And when meeting with the businesses on this block, DDOT representatives' solution to how to accommodate deliveries was, well, the tractor trailers, such as the beer trucks, can park in the median that's displayed in yellow on this particular rendering. But they said, we can't tell you that officially, and that would not be legal, but that's what people will have to do. That's not an acceptable answer. If you're planning, bicycle infrastructure, you need to take into account all of the different uses of the street, and that includes making deliveries and how you accommodate beer trucks, because beer trucks don't offload on the back of the truck, they offload on the sides. So what DDOT representatives are saying is that the beer trucks would have to unload into the travel lanes and then go around through the travel lanes to a point where they can actually get through to the sidewalk to make their deliveries. That just makes absolute sense. It's impractical and it's dangerous. Next slide. Also, a major consideration is the fact that there's a significant amount of tractor trailer traffic on 9th Street, especially servicing the convention center and City Market at O. Here you have a photograph of tractor trailers lined up in what is the route of the proposed route of the cycle lane, of the cycle track, turning onto M Street in order to access the loading docks underneath the convention center. There are sometimes as many as 200 trucks going to this particular entrance of the convention center for a single show. They all would be crossing the cycle track route. That would be dangerous for the cyclists and would impede traffic because they would end up in the sole travel lane. So again, you're going to occupy the travel lane with tractor trailers. What are cars and other vehicles supposed to do to get around it? You're going to have to go into oncoming traffic. That is just totally unsafe. Next slide. The other challenge is the streeteries. Obviously, with the pandemic, the city's made available public space to businesses that want to occupy them to be able to add outdoor space to serve customers. This is the unconventional diner streetery that is on the 1200 block of 9th Street, again, in the lane that will be occupied by the proposed cycle track. And, in the last year, this particular business has benefited from this space to the tune of $1 million in sales. Those are sales that if you were to then move the street area into the parking lane that is currently a travel lane, would further reduce the amount of parking available for customers that are driving to patronize this and other businesses. Next. So, a number of people in the chat have been saying, where are the proposals? People have cited a number of concerns, but no proposed solutions. Well, here are 3 proposed solutions to making the 9th Street cycle track work for businesses as well as bicyclists and the community. The first would be to make 9th Street north of Massachusetts Avenue a one-way street. It already is one-way south of New York Avenue. So we would just be continuing the status quo that exists south of Massachusetts Avenue. If you were to do this, you would simplify and resolve almost all of the challenges that are posed to businesses, because you would have the space for loading and unloading, for example, and for customer parking as a result of having the additional capacity on the street. Second would be, at minimum, to make the 1900 block of 9th Street, which is the densest block in terms of businesses in the entire Shaw Main Street service area, to make that block one way, so that again you could orient the parking and loading areas in a way that would not have a negative impact on these businesses, and perhaps allow them a fighting chance to be able to continue their operations. And then lastly, if we can't, if DDOT won't consider making 9th Street from Florida Avenue down to Massachusetts Avenue one way, why not put the cycle track in the median, just like Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest has? You would resolve not only the ADA issues and the delivery issues, but also you would not impact the number of parking spaces that are being removed as a result of the current configuration that's been proposed by DDOT. So those are 3 options, and Shaw Main Streets and others and the businesses in the neighborhood would love to work with DDOT on exploring those alternatives to making the 9th Street cycle track less of a death sentence to many businesses along 9th Street that characterize our neighborhood and make us a destination locally and known nationally and internationally for the quality of our dining and entertainment opportunities. Thank you very much.
DJ One Love, I'm not sure if anybody else is having problems, but I can't hear you.
You're muted.
Absolutely. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, there we go. My apologies on that. I do want to bring Director Lott back on, and I do want to address a couple of questions that were presented to us through investigations and by concerned citizens regarding the bike lane project. And once again, I want to thank you, Director Lott, for taking your time and your team to join us on this. And I want to reiterate that this is a community discussion that is not about one-sidedness, but about a long-time investigation, a thorough work that is asked everyone in the community. And once again, I'm a bike rider. I've been a bike rider in DC since I've been in DC, which is 1994. I've rode all over the city, northeast, south, and west, and back alleys and everything. And I've seen a lot more than most of the average bike riders out there have seen today. But I'm also an activist, Director Lott, which is how you met me. And I am concerned about other issues as well, such as some of these people like Miss Uzella Spite, who when I went and talked to her, I met her personally. She was having a conversation with one of your project managers, Greg Molesky, about her conditions. And the fact of the matter is, Director Lott, the West Virginia Avenue proposal that was put in place does not benefit her and people like her because of the way they designed it. And it's kind of, it's actually troublesome that she has to go through what she has to go through. And a lot of the people that ride bikes, or even in this chat group, honestly do not take the time to consider that. That is what it is. That's what it's going to be. You have a tough job. You're hearing it from both ends. But I wanted to ask you in particular about the studies that were followed and accessing the public transportation, traffic flow, and traffic patterns, changes, parking utilization, residential density, disabled and handicapped, metro access, population demographics, such as misspiked children, social economic makeup, business impact, postal and delivery services, as well as employee and product safety and financial bottom lines, public and property safeguard, homeowners associations and property value impact, residential private construction projects, and financial impact of ticketing. What do you have to say about that particular part in your studies? Did you all consider everything that I just mentioned? Because I know you did these studies, and we've seen studies around the country and actually in other countries as well, as in Holland and in Netherlands and et cetera. But DC is a unique city. Did you consider all of those things that I just said in your studies?
So DJ One Love, first let me just go back for a second and
Sure.
just acknowledge a couple of the comments from some of the other presenters, Mr. Hanlon and also Alex Pedro. And so one of the things I'd like to say about what we heard and in today's presentation is that, and one of the things I said earlier in my presentation is that this gives us the opportunity to hear feedback and get feedback from different parts of the community, different people based on where they're coming from, or their business, whether maybe people with disabilities, and allows us to be able to go back and make improvements along the way. And so one of the things that we will always be doing is looking to see how we can make improvements on any of our infrastructure projects, whether they're bike lanes or any other type of project here in the district. And so that's one of the things that we will always be doing. So this feedback is very helpful. This feedback is very informative, and it will allow us to be able to make adjustments along the way. But specifically to your question, about the studies that we did follow. So we do assess impacts to and often adjust our designs based on the access to the public transportation and the network. Again, traffic flow, the traffic pattern changes, parking utilization, people with disabilities and the access that they have, and also delivery access. What we do not conduct is like an economic impact analysis per se. And as far as I know, as far as the information that we've been able to ascertain from working with our colleagues throughout the country, no jurisdiction actually does that. But all the studies around the country on the impacts of bike lanes on businesses and property values do show that the bike lanes have either been neutral or have helped to increase business and our property values. So we do look at those types of those makeups and those things that you had identified. And those are definitely factored into the conversations that we have and into the plans that we have, and ultimately into the design and our construction. Now, again, we're not perfect. And so we may make mistakes along the way. But again, it's processes like this and conversations like this that allows us to be able to make tweaks and make adjustments along the way. And so again, I'm very pleased and very glad to be able to have this conversation so we can see how we can continue to improve our network going forward to make it accessible for all.
Thank you for that answer. And yes, that is the purpose of this. Is we don't expect you all to be perfect, and that's why we want more community engagement so that we can all work together, putting our minds together to try to help perfect this as much as possible. Because there's no possible way you're going to please every single person. That's just the way life is. But we can make things better if we work together as a whole community. I wanted to see if John Spalding is on. Is John on? Mr. Spalding, are you there? No? All right, so I'm gonna go to another question that was asked, but on the one I did ask you, Director Lott. So, what do you say to people that are like property owners, and I can say from my own experience helping someone who's a property owner who they're renovating their property, and all of a sudden in the negotiations of renovating their property, bike lanes are put in the middle of this. And now all of a sudden, contrary to what a lot of people in the chat may understand, their property value went down because bike lanes were put in and parking was removed. Now, the reality is that if you don't have parking and you're trying to sell a space in a city, any metropolitan, that can be a deterrent to future buyers or renters of their property. What do you say to people when they lose a property value of, say, in this particular case, $500,000?
Well, again, DJ One Luv, from all the information, all the research that we've done, we haven't seen or any studies that show that values actually have decreased. If we look at some of the other jurisdictions, New York City, which has a very vibrant bicycle infrastructure network, and we know values and property values there are extremely high. I can't say that with certainty, and I did hear from, I believe it was Dr. Agwu who
Yes,
made that reference about the property values. Again, we're looking and seeing how we can, incorporate, a network of multiple type of infrastructure. So not just bike lanes, but making sure that we're providing accessibility, making sure we're providing safety for those individuals that are walking to school or walking to their places of worship, making sure we're providing different types of infrastructure for those individuals to choose whatever mode of transportation they may want to. And so, we'll continue again to look at opportunities and ways we can make improvements. And at the end of the day, one of the things that I think many of you may have heard the mayor say over the course of many years now, and especially the last few years, is that, when it comes to bike lanes specifically, a lot of the easy work has been done. And now it's getting down to really some more of the tougher conversations and the tougher work in terms of where we're going to be implementing or including bike lanes. And so that's going to require conversations like this. That's going to require conversations going forward so that we can have these conversations. But as I had mentioned earlier, it is a commitment that the mayor has made and the district has made to, install an additional 10 miles of bike lanes over the next 3 years for a total of 30 additional bike lanes. And so it's going to require us to have these types of conversations. At the end of the day, we are not looking to try to put any business out of business. We want to make sure that what we're doing is really helping businesses to thrive and to grow. And so where there are areas where we can make improvements, we absolutely are going to do that. Where there are areas where we can make improvements for people who have property in the district, their homes, we're not looking for those property values to go down. And I think, throughout the district, I think we've seen property values rising continuously to the point where it's actually becoming almost unaffordable for some even to live here in Washington, D.C. And so, we want to make it this city, Washington, D.C., a city where everybody can come and live and thrive. They can work, they can play, they can go to their places of worship. That's our ultimate objective. And again, but that's for everybody, not just, one group versus another group. That's for all 8 wards, and that's for all residents and people who live here in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. So basically, that person is screwed. Unfortunately, for that situation. We'll move on from that. The other question that and I'm asking this as well as a lot of other people, is the role of city council and ANCs in communicating and proposing bike lanes into certain communities. What is the importance of them? Because in the situation with West Virginia Avenue, I know for a fact, having engaged with them, it has not been very effective to communicate with a lot of the ANC members in that area. And we're asking, how does DDOT go about letting the community know that they're going to take away 70% of the parking on about a 1.5 mile stretch, and the people in an area where there was already limited parking, and in an area where it is not safe to park on back streets or is very high crime area, and yet DDOT is relying on the ANCs to communicate with people, and yet the ANCs are not communicating with the people, or when we have reached out to the ANCs, they have not taken the concerns of losing 70% of your parking, or as Dr. Agu said, on the 1900 block of West Virginia Avenue, 100% of your parking. They didn't take it serious. What is the role of the ANC, and what do we do, and what do we need to do to change that? Because I'm not going to put all of this on the ANC, but I am going to put a lot of it on the ANC and the council. But a lot of ANC members also are saying that they don't get taken serious by DDOT either. And when they do try to reach out to DDOT about the concerns of the residents.
Well, thank you for that question. And DJ One Luv, one of the things I mentioned earlier in my presentation is one of the things that we are required to do is do the NOI, the notice of intent. And that goes out if there's going to be any type of change in traffic patterns, parking, we are required to put out that notice of intent. It's at least 30, I think it's actually 60 days. And so that gives people the opportunity to provide us feedback and input. And we will continue to be doing that. We are obligated to do that. And we will continue to do that. But as it comes to the ANCs, now, of course, DJ One Luv, we can't go and reach every resident in the community, knock on every door and get everybody out. We'd love to be able to get people out in a forum just like this. But we recognize that people have different obligations. And so, we rely, on the ANCs as being the officially elected representative at the community. And they are at the most micro level of government. And so we're required, again, by law to notify them, the ANCs. And so we really are looking to work with the ANCs to be able to promote opportunities where we're going to be coming out to present to the ANC about things that we are proposing to do that may impact their particular community, their particular single member district. And that's for any of our projects. And this may involve, the loss of parking or the change in a traffic pattern. And so we do give them great weight. Again, I am a former 2-term ANC commissioner, so I do understand the value of the ANC. Now, again, I recognize that, for different reasons, people may not be able to attend the ANC meeting. We do also post this information on our website where people can go in and see what's planned and what's being planned and what's proposed. And so if there are other ways that we can work with the community and provide information to the community, then I definitely welcome that and would love to hear from you or from folks on this call tonight to share with us other ways that we can reach, a wider group of folks. At the end of the day, this is not something we're trying to do in the cover of darkness. We put everything out and we're very transparent about what our plans are when it comes to any infrastructure project. And I'm not just talking about bicycle lanes. But again, we do feel that the ANC is one of the best ways for us to be able to get information out. But again, I do welcome hearing from you and others on this call about other ways that we can make sure that we're reaching other residents that may not be able to always participate in the ANC. And again, as a former ANC commissioner, I do know that, many of our ANC meetings were not very well attended. I do feel like in this day and age, in this COVID environment where we've gone to more of a virtual type setting, I do believe that it is giving more people opportunity to participate. And I think that's actually a good thing. And so I'm hoping that, again, looks like we have roughly about 150 folks on this call right now. So I'm hoping that we're able to get more participation like this for all of our projects, because at the end of the day, it really does help and serve us better so we can make sure that we're incorporating those things that are impacting or that will impact people throughout the community.
And my response to that is one thing. What happens if you find out that either your project manager from that district or the ANCs did not communicate or are reluctant to communicate with the community? Where do we move forward from there as a resident or as a business owner or as a property owner when they have tried to communicate with DDOT or with the ANCs and nothing has happened? Because this is the bottom line. This is the truth. Some of these ANC members and even some of your project members, managers, I should say, have been tone deaf to a lot of the people. So what do you do then? Because this is hurting a lot of people. And it's unfortunate that we're not taking enough time. I'm not talking about you, but I'm talking about as a community to look at the adverse effects of all of this and how it hurts a lot of people, especially the elderly people. And the elderly people, let me say, across the city, especially in areas such as 17th Street Northwest and over in West Virginia Avenue and some of the other areas, even on C Street, they are not the ones that are avidly on social media. That's just the reality of it. But they are the strong voting group quite often and very dedicated, yet they're feeling like they're being ignored, and the same with the handicap. So what do we do about that when agencies or the DDOT appointed project manager for that particular bike lane are not listening to the community? Because I faced it head to head myself with them and saw, even attending the ANC meetings where they did not give us a voice. We proposed before the meeting was set, like a week before, 2 weeks before, that we wanted to talk about it, and they would not allow us to talk about this. So what do we do about that?
Well, and similar to what I had mentioned earlier in my presentation, in my opening, when we were talking about expectations, one of the things I mentioned was that there were a lot of folks, and I got a lot of emails and feedback over the last couple of weeks as this was being promoted, that I shouldn't even attend this particular meeting. And my position is, and this is the position that I've shared with all of my staff here at DDOT, is that we have an obligation to go and meet and visit and talk to as many groups and as many people in many communities as we possibly can before we're doing anything, to get that input. And so as tough as it may be, as tough of a conversation as it may be, that's our obligation, and that's my commitment to everybody on this call and those who are on this call, is to make sure that we're going out to the community. As we met at the ANC over in 8C07, I go out to many of these ANC meetings regularly, multiple ANC meetings throughout the course of a week and a month, but not just ANC community meetings, also to community meetings, also going out to the churches. And we will continue to do that. And you will see me out there. And so, if you're running into a situation where you feel like you're not getting or being heard, then, please, and I ask you to please elevate and raise that to me. We can't go and have these individual one-off conversations. And I know sometimes that's what some folks would like to have, is like, I want to talk specifically to, the project manager about something. But that's one person who may be representing a group of people, but we do want to try to get into a larger discussion or larger groups so that we have, again, everybody has the opportunity to be heard. And so it does not look like it's a one-sided conversation and our one person's point of view conversation that would be impacting us. So we do choose to try to have more of an organized group setting such as this, where people on both sides of the conversation, or both sides of the issue, can be present to have their voices heard. So we've made and agreed to have this conversation here, and that's something that we can also do in the future. But the ANC, and I do want to go back to the fact that the ANC is the most micro level, and that's the method that we have chosen, which is not uncommon to just DDOT. It's really throughout the DC government, that the method that we use to try to communicate information broadly.
So, and I understand that and I respect that, but I am going to say that we need to find some other methods that are more effective, because I, as an activist, am able to go out into the community and speak. I go door to door talking to people. I go door to door handing out flyers. And what I saw was some of these ANCs, and in particular 5D, I'm going to be honest with you, they did not do that. And I was able to get much more information myself in one night than they were basically all summer. So we do need to find different ways to do this, to be able to communicate, and it cannot be just relying on the ANCs with this. And I'm going to be blunt, honest with you. Some of the ANC members are for the bike lanes, and they have a right to be, for it, but they should still be considering the whole overall community, and they're not. I don't want to harp too much on the ANCs, because I do have one more thing, because I know we're limited on time. But one of the major questions that I'm hearing from the people when I'm going out across DC, all over, is that they're for bike lanes, as I am as well, and they're for the environment, they're for biker safety, they're for protection of you, and they are for how could I say this, responsibility and accountability of drivers. But where's the responsibility and accountability of the bike riders when they're riding in these bike lanes, or that do not use the bike lanes, which we see all the time? And you've seen in some of the pictures, I have plenty of pictures and videos as well. They're speeding through, they're disregarding the residents. Because when I was talking to Miss Spite, literally on that corner in that picture, a biker comes through. Now here she is with a cane, handicapped woman, all right, with cerebral palsy, and the biker screams, "You're in the bike lane." Now, if she was in the middle of the street and a car came, a car would have to stop for her. She would have priority over an automobile. But a lot of these bikers, a lot of these cyclists, and like I said, I ride, do not respect the residents or the people. And they go through red lights, they go through intersections and stop signs, and they danger themselves and everyone else when doing so. What can we do to address that issue as well? Because there has to be accountability on all sides. It can't just be one-sided.
Well, and I've had this conversation multiple times. And let me just say, I also am a biker. I ride, and I've shared that with you when I met you back at the ANC meeting a few months ago. One of the things I've said, and I've said this many times over the past several months, as relates to safety in general, it's every user of the roadway's responsibility to observe the laws of the road. Whether you're a motorist, whether you're a biker, whether you're a scooter, whether you're walking, it's everybody's responsibility. And so I've seen what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. We at DDOT, we're not responsible for enforcement. And so that's a separate issue. But I would just say that it's everybody's responsibility. And so, as we've talked, and, we had, unfortunately, a highest number in several years of roadway fatalities this past year in 21. And one is too many. We had more than that this past year. And so one of the things I've said is that, again, it's everybody's responsibility, because, if I'm taking my precautions as a motorcyclist, as a bicyclist, as a pedestrian, or as a motorist, and observing those rules of the roadway, it makes it safer for all. And so, bikers are no exception. And I do expect, and I do want them to be observant of the rules of the roadway as well. And beyond that, we're continuing to look to see how we can improve the infrastructure so that, we aren't having those situations where we're having the conflicts. And so part of the reason that we are putting bike lanes in certain parts of the roadway, maybe on one side of the street versus in the middle, as I think Mr. Quadro had referenced, is really we're trying to eliminate the conflicts. And these are conflicts that would impact, again, our disability, the folks with disabilities, our pedestrians, and our most vulnerable users, children. So we're really looking at all different ways, but it's everybody's responsibility. And that's really one of the things I want everybody to walk away from. It's everybody's responsibility as we're trying to share this roadway space.
Absolutely. Now, I just want to ask you this. If you see that a bike lane project in a particular area is not working, is causing more harm than good in what it was intended, what do you do about that? Because we do see some that are not working. And like I said, I am 100% for them. I like riding on bike lanes, but in certain areas, it's like, yo, this is a mess. This is crazy. And something needs to be done about that. What do you do about that? Because the solution can't be as the project manager on West Virginia Avenue told me, well, it's there, it's done, and that's it. And it's like, but if it's not working, if it's causing more hardship, if we need to go back to the drawing board, as Alex and Ed both proposed, what is DDOT's approach to going back to the drawing board and possibly taking it up off of that particular street, or doing it a better way, or just moving it to another location? Is that possible?
Well, again, we're going to take feedback such as what we're receiving today. We're going to take feedback that we've received over the past many months, and if there are ways that we can improve. And so, again, we recognize that we're not perfect, and we recognize that there's a lot of great ideas. I have a lot of great talented folks on my team that do a lot of great work, but we're not perfect. And so, again, if there are opportunities to make improvements, absolutely we'll take that feedback and we will incorporate that in to make improvements. And so that's what I'm looking for out of this conversation here and future conversations, is how can we make it better, and how can we improve our infrastructure, not just for bicyclists, but for all users of the roadway. And so, if something's not working, we're going to see that, and we're going to hear that, and we'll see how we can make adjustments to improve that.
All right, Director Lott, I know we are past our time limit that we agreed upon, and I really appreciate you joining us. I do want to close out in saying that once again, I thank you for participating in this. I thank you for working with us. And I know that your job is not easy, because my job is not easy. And this is a community effort. I'm going to be honest with you, and I already know that you know this, but there are a lot of people that are on this side, and in the chat group, they're proving it, that they do not care about the residents of DC other than themselves and their bike lanes. And that's unfortunate. I'm gonna just be honest with you. And they're complaining right now, and as we speak, and you know what, they've been complaining. But you know, there was the same type of people that didn't give a darn about the residents of DC being gentrified or pushed out. It's either. It was all about themselves. We have to be honest about this, you know, and I'm saying this to them, not just to you. We have to find a better way to do this, and we have to consider the elderly. Me as a Black man who is a community activist fighting for racial justice, I've looked at a lot of displacement. I've looked at a lot of the marginalization that exists in certain communities, such as in Ward 5, et cetera. And I see these cyclists running through, and they could care less about what goes on in that community because they pass through and keep going to their destination. They're not going to talk about that. They're not. They don't care about the elderly. They don't care about the handicap. They don't care about the fact that some people cannot ride bikes. I'm a DJ. I can't ride my bike to an event where I got to carry 600 pounds worth of equipment. It's not going to work. But they don't care about that. All they want to talk about is traffic safety, and which is important, or cars kill people, which is important, or or them feeling safe, or their children getting to ride on bike lanes, and that's all important. But there are other important things as well when it comes to a community. So with that being said, I'm thankful that you and your team have come to address this issue, this issue and this situation, and understand that our coalition is comprised of members of all over the DC area. And this is a very intersectional issue that we are dealing with here that it really affects a lot of people's lives on a daily basis, and has created some hardships for quite a few people that are not being able to speak or feel that they have not had a voice. And that's why we created this town hall for them. It wasn't for the everyday riders out there, or that small demographic of white males in their 30s that are the majority of the bike lane riders. Okay, it wasn't for them. It was for the overall community. And that's why I wanted to have this town hall meeting, and why I asked you. And I'm so glad that you and your team, and I thank your staff, especially Olivia, for working with us on this. We have to get out of here. Like I said, we have passed our time limit. I hope we can have another one. I want to give a shout out to City State Brewing Company, because they had offered to have this town hall meeting in person, which we could have had more dialogue and more time. But because of COVID, we could not do that. And they are willing to do it again because they want to hear from everyone, not just us. Because they have a lot of bike riders support them, but they want to hear from the overall community. I want to thank WEAC Radio as well, who has been supporting us in this. This town hall will be broadcast on WEAC Radio's YouTube channel, and digitalanalogradio.com as well, which is receiving this right now. Unfortunately, we could not do the live streaming on Facebook because of technical difficulties and time constraints. But I do want to thank you all. I want to thank the DC Coalition on Bike Plans, DDOT Bike Plans, and thank everyone else that has participated, and including my team as well. Director Lott, let's continue to work together, please, you and your staff, and see if we can do some more meetings like this. Hopefully we can answer some more questions. We only got through some of them, but that's the way it is when you're dealing with these type of problems and you have time constraints. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And until next time, keep your head on a swivel. Consider other people other than just yourself, and let's try to work together as a community. I'm DJ One Luv, and I'm out of here. Peace.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.